you for joining us for this episode of Talking Health in the 406, where we are one community under the big sky. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jones, advocate of disability inclusion, accessibility, and health. For this episode, we're going to hear from Orville and Debbie Desjarlais. They are a brother and sister duo that combined their skills in journalism and design and their passion for health and Native culture to create the nationwide magazine Native Wellness Life. Let's listen to their story. So I read that you didn't start working together as a duo until 2018. How did that come about later in life?
Oh, we're both doing our own things. I was in the Air Force when I joined when I was like 23 years old. And then went into magazines and went into newspapers first and magazines and got into the publishing field. And I just did my own thing there. I missed a lot of culture and a lot of Native American ceremonies and actually graduations and everything else. But while I was doing that, Deb was on her own, doing her own thing. What were you doing, Deb, during that time that we were both formulating our skill sets?
Yeah. When I got my graphic design degree, I was working in the Twin Cities with 3M Company, working in the non-Native world. And then I moved over to working with Native Americans and loved it. And I was doing a little bit of marketing and business development. And with that, was able to move to Montana and wanted to figure something else out for myself. And that's kind of where my brother and I started talking and said, hey, let's figure out how we can work together. And at the time I was doing a bunch of newsletters for different organizations, different tribal organizations around here. And so we're like, hey, let's start a magazine, a health related magazine. And so that's kind of how we got started. By then, my brother was retired, and him being a writer and me being a graphic designer seemed like a good fit, but we had no clue. We had no clue how we'd work together.
No, we did not. But we worked well together as children. We did a lot of stuff as kids.
We did. Him being the imagination of everything, and he was kind of the head leader of us growing up. So now, with him and I working together, he's the idea man. He has big picture, and lots of ideas. And I'm kind of the, not only design, but I can execute like nobody's business. So us two together it's been wonderful. It's been great working with my brother. It's cool being in a business with him because then it makes it real, and then we can bounce ideas off of each other and formulate what direction we want to go. And we're always pivoting and moving and changing, and it just makes it really fun.
Our two skill sets seem to complement each other. Mine written and hers visual, and we just work well together. We're on the same wavelength all the time. And it's just a lot of fun for us. It's our passion. What we're doing is not only, it's a business, which is the hardest part, but the joy we get out of it from doing what we do individually, is really rewarding. I just love what I do. And so does Deb. And you can tell by just looking at our product, looking at our magazines each month that we kind of love what we do.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell me a little bit more about the specific roles that you each take when creating each issue of the magazine?
That's kind of interesting because we look at it from a different point of view. We have to plan each month, and a monthly magazine is really, very hard. It's a grind, and you're always meeting deadlines in the publishing industry. And for a monthly magazine, you're starting one, you're printing one, you've already got another one going, and you're looking down the road at other story ideas. So we start out with a strategy of the themes that we want for each magazine. The themes is what we just talk about all the time. What's our theme going to be for this month? And then what's the possible cover? What kind of stories do we need in that? And that just takes a lot of strategy, a lot of planning. And we plan that out, and then we have a process that we put in place that we've been working on for 5 years. We turned 5 years this year, and during that time, we've learned a lot. The best part was learning our process, learning our timelines, and meeting our deadlines. It's become a lot easier after 5 years of doing that, But the process is the idea stage, the strategy meetings, and then writing it. And then I'll give the written document to Deb. She looks at it, does all her research for designing it. And then it goes into the layout stage that she does. She's our only graphic person there, and she does a lot of work, and it's really hard work too. Do you want to explain some of your challenges in graphics, Deb? Because there's a lot there.
There is. So my brother's in Texas. I'm in Billings, Montana. So everything's online or talking on the phone or Zoom calls. And so when he gives me what we're going to write that month, it's in a Word document. There's no pictures. There's nothing. And so it's gotten easier in the last 5 years because now I have a bank of things with 60 different issues that I've designed front to back, 16 to 20 pages. But when I get it from him, it's just a Word doc. And so that's where the imagination comes in. And a lot of his stories are, they're real life stories of things that have happened in our lives or people he's interviewed. And when my brother writes, he writes from the heart. And so, I'll say probably about every couple months, he'll have me crying. He'll send me that Word doc, and it's just touching, and it's written to help our people, but also it's emotional. And so when you get those, you can't just throw those words on a page and then be done with it. I mean, I have to do my research to be up to the level where my brother's at. And he brings me up to a level that I didn't know I could even achieve. So it's just like, okay, so I'll design to the level of what I get. And it's so much fun because then when I'm done with it, it's nothing I even knew I could do. And then I send it back to him and he's like, whoa, but I'm like, well, you're the one who wrote the emotional story, so, so we push each other to, I think, a higher level each time. And that's the beauty of it. And then then we have a proofreader. Now we have a couple, that go through it, and then it comes back to we make changes, and then we send it to our printer. That's pretty much our process.
How is your team made up? Are they all Native people? Do you have a specific interest when you are inviting people to support this magazine?
That's a pretty good question because the magazine has a different perspective. The different perspective is cultural heritage. And that's what we like to promote. And that's what grabs the eyeballs for people to look at the cover and then want to pick it up and take it home. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into people's homes where there's multi-generations living there and can enjoy the information and education that we're offering in there. What we've learned is that culture and heritage is not something you can learn. You can have a PhD in Native studies, but if you're not Native American, you just don't have that information that you vitally need, the perspective that you need to do the kind of writing that we like. From a Native American perspective, coming from a Native American person, it's just something that you can't, I don't think it's something that you can internalize and live by unless you actually are one. So, and that goes into everything that we do. This magazine has a Native perspective. Everything we're doing, we're going into advertising and marketing. We're going to talk about that later. But that perspective that we have is what Native Americans have in their heads. So that's why I identify with our magazine so much. Our magazine is so identifiable that when they buy the magazine subscription for 1 year, our re-up rate for resubscriptions is like 95%. Unheard of in the magazine. In fact, unheard of almost in any, to have somebody order a product and then 95% re-up rate is just amazing. So whatever we're doing seems to be working. So I guess the more indigenous writers that we have, the better it is for us. And it's not racial. It's just a fact of like if we were going to be doing this health and wellness magazine in Puerto Rico, we wouldn't be the one for it, right? Because the Puerto Rican culture is so much different. They look at things so much differently.
And within the last couple of years, we've been able to add contract writers across the nation. And majority of them are women in their like 30s to 60s, I'd say, that are helping us. And so that's been really fun. It's for me to be able to read what they write and to design to it. So we're just adding more into our mix of different things we do. But yeah, so that's kind of how we've changed. So, and we have, I'd say 8 to 10 contract writers right now.
We have about 8 to 10 contract writers, so we're always looking for more. If anybody's interested, contact us. We're looking for diversity. There's 574 tribes. So, I'm not going to say we need 574 different writers, but that's a different perspective that each one of them bring that adds value to our magazine. And learning about other tribes is just amazing. Like I said, I was away from the Native culture for a long time, being in the military. Coming back, it helped me reintroduce myself to my own culture and heritage, which has been just very, very rewarding. But if you think about it, even if you just know your own culture from your own tribe, there's 573 other tribes to learn about. And I like to say that's 574 different ways of doing things, right? They all do something a little bit different, a little bit unique. And it's really interesting in learning about that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of perspectives we like coming from our writers and everybody else who works for our magazine.
Oh, and we do have a writer that's down in Navajo country. So that's kind of cool. Just down south. So we like different perspectives for sure.
So I've heard you mention culture and heritage a lot. And what I'm feeling is that is really, really important to you rediscovering your Native heritage, as well as for the purpose of this magazine. So this is a health and wellness magazine, I think, at the surface, but there's so much more to that. Can you explain a little bit more why culture and heritage is so important to the health and wellness of Native people?
What we found out, and what my brother has taught me also, because I'd never designed a magazine before until I did this. And so it's just been a dream come true right there. But was adding color, a ton of color. So when we first started the magazine, in my mind, I thought, okay, it's a Native American health and wellness. So I'm thinking old pictures. I don't know, kind of more browns and blacks and grays in there. And as my brother and I were talking, he was like, go for color. Everyone loves color. Everyone will pick something up if there's color. So then that changed my thinking right from the beginning, and we just started just flooding them with color. But also with that, throwing in any kind of culture. So our people love seeing anyone in regalia. Anything where we can tie back our culture, because our people are hungry for it, just hungry for it, and they've never seen it in a magazine before. So we're breaking ground on all of that, and it's been so much fun. We do this page that's called Name the Regalia, and it's little kids wearing their regalia and explaining what part of the regalia they're wearing in their words. Not only is it educating me, but it's also educating other people. And plus we're showing off our little Native kids in regalia, and it's just cute page. And it's not every month, but whenever I can, I throw it in there. But that just kind of shows you right there. It's like we're teaching people about culture. We're, giving the bright colors, and no matter what in my magazine, on either the cover or somewhere in there, if there isn't a Native person in there, you're going to see some kind of Native design on it, something that ties us back to our culture. And then my brother could talk about the other parts.
Yeah, well, one of the tricks that she'll use, not more of a trick, just part of how she operates, is if they're talking about a certain tribe, like I said, there's 574 of them. Each one of them has their own distinct culture and heritage. She'll research that tribe. She'll look at the colors they're using, look at the patterns they use, look at the stuff they have on what they're wearing in their regalia, what they do, right? She researches all that and creates a Native design just from her mind. And she'll use that as design. And the people of that tribe, they know what she's doing. And that's what grabs their eyeballs, right? So they know she's touching on their culture, their specific tribal culture, when they're looking at some of this stuff, because they identify with it. That's it's a lot of research and a lot of work to do what we do. And when you're saying about the depth of health and wellness, it is extremely deep. I keep telling people, we're trying to tell people to eat well and exercise, but that's the two hardest things to do. It's the two hardest things anybody can do who's a human being. Right? To try to eat right and exercise, it sounds easy, but it's really, really hard. So one of the guiding things that we use in everything that we do is called the medicine wheel. Are you familiar with the medicine wheel, Mackenzie?
I've heard about it, but I would love to hear a deeper description of what it is.
Okay, so we started this out, and then it naturally just fell into place using the medicine wheel as the core of everything that we do. The medicine wheel is just basically, here, let me show you, kind of like that. It's a circle with 4 different colors, and the colors are going to be different from different regions, but white, yellow, red, and black are the colors that they normally use, and white being the mind. You must exercise. No, this is kind of like a form of exercise, right? A form of therapy, a form of doing, right? So you have to, the mind for our purposes is education, schools, tribal colleges, and our just for kids section that she was talking about. Anything that educates our people. And spirit, the spirit portion of the medicine wheel could deal with food sovereignty, culture, holistic medicine, mental health. A lot of the food that we get, like the buffalo, that's sacred. That's a spiritual food. So that's why we can include that into the spirit side of the medicine wheel. The emotional side, we're talking about drug and alcohol addiction. We're talking about suicide prevention, historic trauma, post-traumatic stress, PTSD. That's all the emotional side of the medicine wheel. And then the body side, that's the greatest one that we focus on in our magazine. That'd be diabetes prevention, cancer awareness, injury prevention, fitness, good health and wellness in Indian country, nutrition, tobacco cessation, food is medicine, and public health. That's a wide array of subject matters that we can talk about. And that's the depth that you were talking about. Eating right and exercise is right up at the beginning. But when you start adding all this other stuff, it does get complicated. So one of the reasons why we started the magazine, to tell you the truth, is because of health disparities. But a lot of people in our family circle have diabetes and have complications with it. My grandmother had to take a shot every day for it. So it's one of the things that we wanted to reduce. And then you looked at the health disparities. Unfortunately, when you look at any health disparity, it seems like Native Americans are at the top of that list in a bad way, right? So here's some of the stuff that we researched and found out when we started the magazine. And this will go right into another story that we want to tell you, right? So 1 in 4 Native Americans, the AIAM population, American Indian Alaska Native population, 1 in 4 has high blood pressure. 1 in 6 are elderly. 1 in 6 are diabetic. 1 in 6 have asthma. And 1 in 8 suffer heart disease. And some other disparities. This is all from the CDC. Another one is 60% are more likely to commit suicide, twice as likely to smoke, twice as likely to die during childbirth, 50% more likely than others to have a substance abuse disorder, 3 times more likely to die from diabetes, 5 times more likely to die from TB, and we die 5 years sooner than anybody else. So when we're looking at that, that's kind of what we're trying to reduce. Is the goal of our magazine. And the way to do that is through prevention. The time to do diabetes prevention is before you're pre-diabetic. It's starting way before you have a heart operation or your foot cut off from diabetes. It starts a lot sooner than it, and you should always be reminding people of that. So that's what we do in our magazine. We tell people about diseases and disease prevention, and there's wellness checks, blood pressure checks, colonoscopies, reminders every year. We do that every year. Remind people of what they should be doing to monitor their own health. When I read all the disparities after we learned from that, we had the pandemic hit. The thing about that was all these disparities that I just told you about were fresh in the minds of Debbie and me. And she's the one that she's the one that had the COVID scare first. She hit it early and nailed it early and was tracking it. And then she brought it up to my attention, I think it was in January and February, and looked into it. And after I realized that the pandemic was stalking people with these disparities, that means we had a monster hunting our people, right? They're looking for people with diabetes. This disease is looking for people with heart issues, looking for people with asthma, looking for people with heart disease, actively seeking them out and actually killing them. So we were super scared when the realization hit us early in the year. And this was before anybody else was worrying about it. So when it did hit, we just freaked out. We had only been in existence for 1 year. We didn't have, you're starting a business, you don't have a lot. But we didn't let that stop us. So we just said we need to do a special edition. The power of prevention in this case is something that I think you can use for any disease out there, right? Information at the start of COVID was the only thing that we had. There were no shots. There was nothing you could do other than prevention. And the only prevention we had was information. And who were the dealers of information? That's Deb and I. We got a magazine. So we use that as a way to get the word out. Wash your hands, do this, do that. Let's just try to save our people from a lot of them dying. But unfortunately it did. It happened.
So let me just jump in here. This is where DPHHS
yes.
saved the day. Saved the day.
Saved us.
So we were in the middle of doing a fry bread issue, which we were super excited about. And then COVID was coming. And so in the middle of the issue, we're like, you know what? Let's just stop, drop, and roll. Let's get rid of that issue. Let's do a COVID front to back on our magazine to teach our people. And then once we did that, I got a hold of Karen Cantrell, who was the director of American Indian Health with DPHHS, and said, hey, got an idea for you. We have this magazine, and we have it on these reservations, just little areas around Montana. And I said, we would love to take this magazine, blow it out. My goal would be for every Native person in the state of Montana to get our magazine. So it kind of tells them to wash their hands, tells them, different little things to do during the whole COVID part. So she agreed, and we were able to send that magazine out at 3 different times. And how many did we reach after the 3 different times? And we sent them to every reservation, tribal health, you name it.
About 70,000 in all.
Yeah, I think it was about 70,000. We did a spring, summer, and a fall issue called the COVID report. And no one had to, we got funding from the governor, from DPHHS, for each one of them. But
and
what
from
was
the tribes.
And from the tribes, different kinds of funding that we were finding for that. But what's cool is even to this day, we'll have people come up to us and go, I remember the magazine I got at the post office with the teepee on the front and said COVID. I said, yeah. And so they're like, yeah, that was a cool magazine. So we did reach everyone that we thought we would. But that was like the really, really cool part of being able to help our people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. One more piece of data that I hold, and then it leads to a question. The most common causes of premature death among Native people in Montana are largely related to risk behaviors that can be changed: commercial tobacco use, alcohol use, substance use disorder, poor diet, little or no physical activity, and lack of preventative health care, such as vaccines, cancer screening, or treating high blood pressure, as many of those things you've said. Changing these risky behaviors requires not only a change in personal behavior, but really correcting the current social environment and acknowledging the historical trauma that leads to it. Can you talk a little bit more about how the magazine, Native Wellness Life, combats that trauma and elevates healing practices to support better health?
So what our magazine does is it goes to our clients once a month, and once a month they read this positive spin on a lot of negative information. Nobody wants to read negative information. No one wants to read stats. They want to read a good story. Well, in that story, at the end, middle to the end, my brother's telling them, hey, why don't you do this? Or why don't you get your blood checked? Or why don't you, whatever the story, it always goes back to taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, trying to do the right things for your body. So what we call it is a drip, drip, drip effect. So each month they get the magazine. There's something positive that they want to read about, and then they share that magazine with everyone in the family. You have the grandma in the family, because there's 10 to 20 people in some people's households, and they share it with them. And the little kids have a page, and so everybody's reading it. Everyone's keeping the magazine the whole month, and they're actually saving them. But that information is in there, and they're reading it at some point in that month. And so we've heard people say, yeah, I started with this article, then later on I read this article. And, so it's getting to them in a positive way, in a usually a heartwarming story.
Right. And what she's saying is very true. It's very positive. The historic trauma part is sad. Racism is still alive and well, and that's bad. And we know our people are getting that every day. So when they're reading our magazine, it's kind of a vacation for them from that. It's, we try to put a positive spin on everything, even if it's diabetes, right? Because there's positive things you can do. There's positive stories out there of people who beat diabetes. There's things that people do every day that help them with their blood sugar. And we try every which way to keep that positive and keep it going. And like she says, the drip drip of wellness. We've made there's so many different sections in our magazine that a reader might find one thing in there that they found of interest. And they're going to go, oh, maybe I'll just reduce my coffee intake this time. That's what I got out of this magazine this time, right? Well, the next month you might go, oh, maybe I'll try taking a walk 15 minutes. That's another thing they got out of another magazine. Well, by the end, and as you know, behavioral changes are the hardest to make. And if we can just get them interested in one positive change per edition, by the end of the year, you will have made 12 positive changes in your life to improve yourself. So that's just one way I look at it. Because I know there's one, we work really hard on the whole edition, but if you can just take one piece of advice out of that, then I'm happy.
Me too.
So you've mentioned the different sections in your magazine, and I noticed there's consistency throughout. You have a diabetes section, native news, you have a feature story, there's always a kids section, and then a cooking healthy section.
Yeah.
That one stood out to me. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about the types of recipes you choose, the ingredients, if there is historical traditions in the methods of cooking that you choose for those recipes. Tell us more.
Deb, let me just jump in real quick because Deb's going to take this over. We get feedback all the time, and that's the number one feature they like in our magazine is the recipes. If we had 15 pages of recipes, and if I didn't write a single word, that would sell out. They would love it. She could do this thing on her own, right? Because that's how much they love this thing. But what I'm proud of is the fact that she set the tone at the very, very first recipe, and she has kept that up 5 years later. It's amazing how she started this, thought it through, and still pretty much the same. Go ahead and explain what you're thinking and what you're doing, Deb, on that first one.
Yeah. So, and I'm super excited about it. I've learned through my grandma and my mom, how to cook just about everything. I don't have any favorite. I like cooking everything. But when we started this, I was like, all right, I'm going to throw out, our cultural recipes first. And so that's what I started doing. And now it's kind of evolved to, healthy, recipes, but also someone that's on the commodity program, the FDPIR program. If they're on that, they could use their commodities in our recipes. So, and that's how I think, because we were brought up, we were little commodity kids. And part of it was, you have dry milk. You didn't have real milk. So we had dry milk. So we always had dry milk on hand. So when I make bread, there's dry milk in it. Any kind of soups, use dry milk. So just little things like that I've added into it. But then also looking at the commodity program, they have ground buffalo now. They have salmon. They have a lot of traditional ingredients. There's probably about 6 or 10 of them. And I try to use those quite a bit in my recipes. And they're all recipes that I try, that I've been using. But I come up with them all by myself. And I used to take my own pictures, but now we can afford a photographer. Thank goodness. Love my photographer. She comes over to the house and takes pictures. Eventually we're going to be adding video, of me cooking, but we're not quite there yet. But, it's just a labor of love doing the recipe page.
Yeah. So expect some cookbooks in the near future. She's got enough for 5 years worth of of recipes that we can come up with a great cookbook, and it's actually in the works.
And can you tell me what FDPIR stands for?
Food distribution on Indian reservations. And a lot of people in Indian country just call it the commodity program. The FDPIR program's trying to get rid of that, but that's just what people call it, and you can't change it.
Another cool thing about that program, we started working with them about 3 years ago.
Yes.
And now we're at the point where the whole region, there's 8 states in it, they get our magazine. So you're talking about 8 states, they get our magazine, they have their boxes of food for their elders or whoever's on the commodity program for that group. And they take our magazine and throw it in the box. And then people, when they come pick up their commodities, they have our magazine with it. So that's in the state of
Montana,
North Dakota,
South Dakota, Kansas,
Nebraska,
yeah.
Wyoming. There's one more. But so we're super proud of that. That's been cool. And in fact, we've worked with some other food programs too, and those seem to work really well. There's a elder program in Wisconsin that they've just run out of funding, but we had them for a year, and it was all the reservations in Wisconsin, their elder program, they give out a box of food to all the elders and throw our magazine in it. And the one that we went and watched was with the Oneida tribe. And the elders, there's like 400 cars parked outside. And for 1 hour, they pull up, they get their box of food, they get our magazine, and then they pull out. But in their boxes of food, they have like hydroponic lettuce. They have fresh apples. They have all these apple orchards. They have buffalo.
Amazing.
It's a really cool program. But our magazine seems to go really well with all these food programs, because they get right to the people and they get to our audience being elders and actually anybody. So,
It worked out well for the food programs like Feeding America, the number one nonprofit in America, partnered up with us, and we were able to send magazines out in Oklahoma to about 300 or 400 boxes there. Deb, goes out to the tribes there, goes right to where the people live. It delivers it out there. And then it had one in Arizona too, didn't they, Deb?
Yeah, that was the Navajo and the Hopi.
Yeah. And that went to all over the place.
Yeah, the tribe that's in the Grand Canyon, they have a helicopter that goes, and they would helicopter our magazines down to this reservation in the Grand Canyon. Or like, could we ride with our magazines? We would love it.
And for the Not Commodities program, FDPIR, is that available to everyone, or do specific people have certain requirements they have to meet in order to have access to that program?
Oh, that is for the FDPIR. That is strictly tribal. You have to be part of the tribe in order to partake in that. However, the equivocal program to that would be SNAP. They're both very, very similar. One's those specifically for tribes.
Thank you for sharing that.
We'd love to get more involved with SNAP because, again, it's another food program. There's a lot of Native Americans involved in that. We'd love to be able to put a magazine in all the SNAP boxes too, if that's possible. That'd be a dream come true.
That would be a great opportunity for everyone to get access to your magazine, the information you're sharing, and like you said, the positive outlook on Native culture and families and bringing back that culture. So you say you've been working on this for 5 years. You have 60 issues out. How many magazines do you distribute every month? And what's the rate of growth that you've seen?
It varies. Of course, we started out really small, and it slowly picked up. Right now, we're printing about, I think it's around 10,000, 10 to 16,000. It varies. One time we're printing a whole bunch, but it varies. Some of the grants run out, and then we get less. And then grants increase, and we get more.
So what my brother's saying is our readership. So each household, there's about, we figure six to 10 people in a household that are reading our magazine. So our readership is basically about 60,000.
Yeah. It's about
nationwide.
60.
That's incredible.
And it's about 30,000 in Montana alone.
Yeah.
we only have 78,000 Native Americans in Montana, right around there, 80,000, something like that. So it's not bad. Our outreach to Montana, of course, that's where we're from. That's where we started, and that's where we got the most help. Our outreach in Montana is just amazing. Mm-hmm. We've had some grants that have paid for our magazine to go into public areas in Montana, restaurants, stores, grocery stores, and places like that, as well as all of the healthcare centers and clinics and stuff like that who are already carrying them. So some places you can pick up the magazine in 6 or 7 different places. And these are small communities, So, yeah, we're kind of proud of that. We built a platform in Montana that can actually get word out to Native Americans out there. We didn't bring up the fact that the reason why our magazine works so well is because it's a trustworthy communication tool, meaning it's going to come out every month, on the month, every time for the whole year, for eternity, right? Internet, not so much up in the Wolf Point area or some of these other very rural areas that we live in where phone calls get dropped. You don't have internet service that time, or sketchy internet service, and it can't be relied upon in some of these very, very rural areas. But the magazine can be depended on, so they'll pick it up all the time and read it. The FDPIR program for the food commodity, these are the people who need just the basics they just need food. You're looking at food and shelter, right? Looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? When you're just focused on food and shelter and surviving and living, you don't have a lot of money left over for cell phone service or internet service, which can be kind of costly in some of these rural areas because it's costly to get it out there, right? It's costly to set up out in the middle of nowhere and have very few people, servicing your internet stuff. So the strength of our magazine comes from that. Now, once the internet service is open to everybody, that's going to change our business model. It's going to change how we communicate. But right now, that seems to be working for us. And especially the people in DPHHS who have programs like the WIC program or the SHIP program who's already advertising with us, they see the value of using our magazine to reach out to whom they want to reach, right? So one of the things we realized really early on, and it's the elders. Our Native elders they just absolutely adore our magazine. They love getting it. Our greatest fan base probably comes from elders, and they just love us. We actually give away autographs at the last conference we were at. Cutest thing ever. I've never given an autograph in my life. So crazy. But very much honored that, we're reaching this segment of society that has a lot of, in our social circles, elders are very valuable. So when we're talking about passing on information and teaching tribes what to do, healthy and wealthy lives, they're the ones that actually will help us with that. So, for instance, you were talking about tobacco. We just did a vaping campaign. And the campaign, again, it's a teaching tool that we want to teach everybody. Don't forget about Native Americans, right? Our chances of smoking are much greater. Twice as likely to smoke than anybody else. And that includes our teens and everybody else. So when we did the vaping campaign, automatically you'd think, we're going to target the kids, right? That's what we do. You target the kids and call it good. Well, when's the last time you had a teenage boy you were able to talk to him, able to target him, market to him, and have him listen, right? It's the hardest demographic in the world, a Native American boy, to stop him from vaping. You know what? When you do the studies, 15% of teens don't watch TV. So what do? Right? How do you reach these guys? So we actually did a poster with a guy in regalia, and then we had another youth. She was 15 years old. Her name's Bailey. She's just an awesome person. Anyway, they were doing some peer-to-peer stuff with us. The important part of that was we put these commercials on YouTube, got about 250,000 hits. We're with KTVQ TV station. Anyway, they were saying what they were surprised about with our stats was that a lot of them were young boys. A lot of young boys were watching those videos. I think they were watching the young man who's the dancer they were talking about anti-vaping messaging. But they said that's the first time they've ever seen teen boys actually spend more time and get more hits on YouTube than anybody else visiting that. So we annoyingly tapped into something that was kind of cool.
Another thing is, so our magazine, after working it for 5 years, we've built these relationships with different groups, and one of them being with Rocky Mountain tribal leaders, and things have just evolved with a lot of the campaigns that we've been just putting in our magazine. It's like, hey, let's move into the advertising agency. So we've also become Kea Advertising. And that's what my brother's talking about, is the vaping campaign. So we received that last year from Rocky Mountain tribal leaders and used our magazine as a way to communicate to the elders. So we knew they were getting the magazine, so we got them. And then we had the youth in the commercials, in the ads in our magazine, and then on YouTube. And so we were like trying to hit every age we could in different ways. And then we also used QR codes, which you don't see many of them around in the Native communities. And so it was teaching people how to use QR codes. And then once they got on, they're like, wow, I didn't know it was a live video. So we had 3 different videos, 3 different models that were talking on the videos from the posters. And so we did a whole campaign on it. So it was just really fun. So that's kind of what we're evolving into also, besides the magazine. So it's just one other part of our business now.
Right. One of the things we did early on was join up with KTVQ as the CBS station, and they actually shot the video for it. And they actually maintained it on the Indian Country website, which we also helped them. We actually talked them into starting Indian Country website, and now it has turned into 6 different Indian Country websites throughout Montana. Each station has its own Indian Country website. The one in Great Falls is the one that's most visited. But yeah, they put it on their Indian Country website. But more importantly, that they aired the commercial as a PSA, and it was shown 180 times through 5 different TV stations in Montana for 2 months. And during the Super Bowl, Paramount Plus in Montana picked up the commercial and aired it during the Super Bowl halftime, where 300,000 people viewed that video.
On behalf of myself and the crew behind the scenes, thank you for listening to the Talking Health in the 406 podcast, where we are one community under the big sky. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jones. Our guests on today's podcast were Debbie and Orville Desjarlais with the Native Wellness Life magazine. If you would like more information on what you heard today, visit our website at talkinghealthin the406.mt.gov. That's talkinghealthin the406.mt.gov. And if you haven't already, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe.